Charlie, and today is the beginning of another reading vlog. It's Tuesday. Usually I begin these vlogs on a Monday, but I took Monday off work because it would give me a clear run through until Friday. And it was my mum's birthday on Saturday, so I thought we could do something yesterday to celebrate it. Naturally, I just took her into Macclesfield town centre and we hoped that we'd be able to find her a gift and we'd have a nice wander around all the shops. But it's been a long time since either of us actually went into Macclesfield town centre and discovered really that there's not that much by way of interesting things. Not for us anyway. But we were also surprised by the number of places we didn't know that existed in our town centre. Today we've discussed going to Bakewell, but we go there often. It's a favourite place of ours, and some family friends recently visited Tideswell, which is about the same distance from us really, still in Derbyshire, still in the Peak District, and we've heard some good things, so we're considering going to Tideswell instead. It's currently 11 o'clock and I like to be out of here by now and getting everything done, but my mother's currently downstairs watching the Hotel Transylvania film that she really likes. I don't know which one it is, but they end up going on a cruise ship. She adores the Hotel Transylvania series. I don't know why. I think it falls into that whole spooky, funny thing that she likes with the Addams Family. When I spoke to you last week, I said how I was reading Every Drop is a Man's Nightmare by Kamalei Kakimoto. I said that I would have finished this book on Sunday. I did not. It is a short story collection and I am currently 136 pages into this and I'm reading the short story entitled Hotel Molokai. And perhaps getting the pronunciation wrong. I'm discovering through reading this that there are a lot of Hawaiian words that people butcher when they try and speak the language. So there's every chance that I got that incorrect. It has been an interesting collection so far, but I am finding, as I do with other short story collections, that I don't want to rush through and read all the short stories at once. It's only as I've got older that I've realised that's the best way for me to process a short story collection, is reading 1 to 3 a day from a collection, as opposed to trying to just get through the whole thing and absorb those stories. There have been touches of folklore within here that I've enjoyed, learning some more of Hawaii's myths and legends, whether they have been created by the author or their riffs on other pieces of folklore, I don't know, but I have enjoyed seeing their inclusion in here. There is something of the speculative aspect to some stories, such as the one I just read entitled Miss Amelia's Salon for Women in Charge. There was something disturbing about the story Mad Women. I think that for me, the story that had the most impact from the off, and I felt like I was getting into what this collection was about, was with the tale Temporary Dwellers. And so that story sees a young woman's first sapphic love affair and experience of love alongside an island being taken over by the US government and being bombed for what the US are saying are necessary trials to train their military. I think that it talks this whole thing that we're seeing talked about a lot within media, about how Hawaii's being taken over a lot by people buying up beaches and turning them into private beaches, or more and more of the tourism industry taking over, so actual people who were born on the island are unable to continue living on the island. And to me, that story in particular spoke to that and discussed that. However, there are moments within the stories where I almost feel as though the author might be forcing a point a little too hard. There's always this thing in short story writing, at least when we're being taught about it at uni, that when you're talking about a big event, you want to talk about it from a personal perspective as opposed to a universal perspective. So you don't want to talk about the whole thing in terms of how it happened, why it happened, and that sort of thing. You are going to find a person's life and you're going to zone in on what's happening to them whilst that event goes on in the background. And occasionally I felt like there were moments where the background noise overtook the rest of the story. There are also occasions where I've really been enjoying a story and then it seems to have ended quite abruptly and I don't really know what the author was getting at or why she ended it in such a fashion. Sometimes I think maybe it's to leave the conclusion up to the reader's imagination, or the author believes that they've left enough hints for you to figure out what's going to happen, but sometimes I didn't actually get that from my own reading experience. Still, I have 4 stories left to read in this, which means I could finish it today, potentially. I've just heard that my dad and brother have arrived home, which means we're probably going to have to make them tea or breakfast or dinner before we leave. They're lambing at the moment, so it's a huge thing of everyone keeping weird hours in this house. But it did mean that I got some extra reading done last week that I didn't anticipate. But yes, if I do finish this today, then tomorrow's May the 1st and I can start on my May TBR. I was watching the Books Unbound podcast yesterday and remembered that it's Mashed Potato May, and also recognised that some of the books I included on my May TBR from last year, which was for Mashed Potato May, are on this TBR again this year. And this is a month where you're supposed to tackle the books that have been on your shelves the longest. All books that you've wanted to get to the longest, which for me is why Black Swan Green has ended up on there, Streets of Laredo is on there, and How We Disappeared is on there. And they are definitely the main books that I want to get to next month, apart from the books that are also on my Alternative Women's Prize TBR. I'd really like to get that TBR finished because then I can do a wrap up of my rankings and maybe find an official winner. I know what book is currently at the top of my list for that, but we have 3 books left that could potentially take that. Anyway, someone's coming up the stairs, so I will speak to you tomorrow. About an hour ago, I finished reading Every Drop is a Man's Nightmare by Megan Kamalei Kakimoto, and as good as these short stories were, I don't think it's going to be a collection that remains on my shelves. So often, I think with short stories more than anything, it comes down to personal taste. And while there are many stories in here that could do with going back and being reread and explored further. Indeed, earlier today I read the story Some Things I Know About Elvis, and the ending of that story had me thinking, well, where did that come from? And I went back and I looked where the author had hinted towards things happening, and I was thrilled because I felt like the author had got one over on me because I hadn't seen the foreshadowing, I hadn't seen the hints. And I think that, you know, it's one of those things with short stories, you have to be more of an intensive reader and more focused when you are reading a short story than necessarily you do with a novel. I'm not saying that novels don't foreshadow or have these things, but I think that a short story is so much of a condensed form that often we can miss things. But personally, I don't know what it is about this book. I liked the stories that I read, I liked the collection as a whole, but it isn't one that I felt wholeheartedly invested in. I appreciated what the author had to say about everything that's going on in Hawaii. There is a lot about work and lack of work, a cost of living crisis over there as well, which becomes quite prevalent in the penultimate story. And I think that I appreciated that aspect of this collection, getting to find out more about a culture of which I know little, more than I did the stories themselves. I enjoyed the folklore aspects of it, and they did speak to me as a reader. The final story in here spoke to that part of me that likes to read stories about themes of grief and death. That's the thing. There is nothing in this collection that I disliked. I didn't hate this at all. I have nothing bad to say about this collection. For me, it's just, as often happens, it feels like a one and done type book. If somebody wanted to put the work in and go back and reread these stories, then I'm sure that they would, but I just don't have that impetus, nor do I have that want to go and read this book again in future. However, it is a superb book, as it says here, a stunning debut. I get that. I understand the plaudits that it's received, and I understand why so many people have wholeheartedly given themselves over to this collection. For me, it just didn't have staying power and isn't something that I am invested enough in to keep on my shelves. However, there was a short story in that collection that inspired me to go and pick up another book from my shelves, and that is Written on the Body by Jeanette Winterson. I immediately went, after getting that book, and started reading this, and my father found me stood on the landing. He's like, "What are you doing there?" And I found myself completely entranced and enchanted by this book. There is so much in here that within 40 pages has felt quotable, and it's all of these meditations on love and young love, and there is a rhythm to the prose that feels like poetry. There's also this humour in there that reminds me of some of my favourite comics. This line felt as though the author was telling me what this story was going to be about, which is, "I used to think of marriage as a plate glass window just begging for a brick." And that felt incredibly telling. And then as the story's gone on, I read 40 pages in an instant. It's one book that I'm about to take the dog for a walk, and I'm wishing I'd taken the dog earlier, because I just want to sit down and read this entire thing in one foul swoop. I don't know what it is, but the writing within this book just captured me. Something within this book told me to go to Written on the Body. So, if I like this book, then I will have this book to thank. And maybe I won't rush to take it off my shelves then. But Written on the Body, so far, we have the narrator who is explaining away their love to Louise, who sometimes you're getting told this story about the narrator meeting Louise, and at other times the reader becomes Louise and the narrator is speaking directly to the reader as though the reader is Louise. It's been a while since I've read a Jeanette Winterson, and I can remember my first experience reading Sexing the Cherry years ago and not properly understanding what was going on. And then I just read 40 pages of this in quick succession, and it feels like this story and I are going to get along. And I don't know why, because so many of the stories I'm reading recently have all had affair plot lines in them in some way, and it was irksome to me, because that seems to be something that I did to myself when I read a lot of my alternative women's prize books. But there's something about the voice in this that's just connected with me and seems to have taken over my brain a little bit. Otherwise, yesterday after I spoke to you, the mother and I went out and had a rather nice day in Bakewell. We'd always planned to go to Bakewell, and then a friend of mine went to visit Tideswell, and we thought we'd go there because there was supposedly a second-hand bookshop. There is, but it doesn't open till Thursday, so we said we'd go into Bakewell instead. And then I'd found a pub that I wanted us to visit in Tideswell, which was 15 minutes away from where we were, so we went around Bakewell. We had a good time. I didn't buy any new books. Again, in Bakewell there is a second-hand bookshop, and I was scouring the children's shelves in search of Magnus Powermouse by Dick King-Smith, because there is something in my mind that says I have to own that book, but if I own that book, I want to buy it second-hand. This is a book I have talked about for years, how when I was in year 4, the teacher had a bookshelf and you used to go and that's where you'd get your books from, as opposed to going to a school library or getting them out of one of those book boxes. And I picked this book up and I read it and I loved it, and then I've never seen it again. And at some point I did begin to question whether it was just some sort of fever dream of 9-year-old Charlie, but I know this exists, I just haven't found the book yet. But part of me is determined. It's like my quest to find this book. And I feel like if anyone else found it and wished to send it to me, then it would almost ruin my quest, my enjoyment of going around these charity shops in search of this one book. I am also on a little bit of a ban of buying books until I've read the ones from my shelves. And yesterday I did think if I saw anything that I knew I would definitely read within the next couple of months, I would buy it. And I went into Maxwell's in Bakewell, and there was certainly a good number of books in there that I thought were fantastic, some from the Women's Prize shortlist, but I ignored them because I thought I'm definitely not going to get to them before I read the other books on my shelves. I had a May TBR already planned, so it was just silly. But yes, it was a very nice spring day, and my mum said I chose the perfect day for us to visit there. And then we went to the Anchor, which is a great pub just outside Tideswell, and if you were ever up in the Peak District about to walk the Monsell Trail, then I definitely recommend visiting the Anchor Inn. Established in 1699, and you can find out more about it on the internet because the owner recently painted a space outside designated for tractors next to his disabled bay. That's that for today. I'm planning on taking Sally for a somewhat longer walk. I've left it a bit later today in the hopes that I won't run into the young dog as I did last week. But I'll see you when I see you. Well, the coat's remaining on for a minute or two. My goodness, traffic was difficult this morning. A water main had burst on a road, so there were temporary traffic lights to get through as soon as I set off this morning. And then getting down a dual carriageway, then there's a wagon, there was more traffic. Just coming down the road that's near my work, where the school is, that's always getting built up because parents are parking where parents shouldn't park. And because we were waiting for oncoming traffic to come through, this person decided they were going to be incredibly smart and come in and decide to overtake the line of traffic that was waiting to go through, only to block the road further. And I just looked at them thinking that they were a little bit of an idiot. It was a great way to start my Friday morning, I can tell you. It's been a very mixed bag of a week. Fantastic day on Tuesday, then family bereavement on Tuesday, then really nice walk on Wednesday in which it inspired me to do some writing. So when I got home, I just sat down and I wrote 3 pages of this stream that had come into my head whilst I was at the forest on this 2-hour walk. I think it was 2.5 hours actually, and wrote that down. So didn't actually read written on the body like I'd hoped to. I'd hoped to just knuckle down and read it on Wednesday because the feeling of wanting to absolutely just rocket through a book was there, but then this idea came into my head and I ended up writing all this stuff down instead. However, I didn't have anything to read at the writers group yesterday, but we were back and we had some fantastic pieces from our writers. A few of us have discovered that we're going to be in Written Off Publishing's next A-Up anthology, which was nice. It's great to see that a few of our writers have managed to make it in there, and I'm also grateful to the editors of that who've thought that our writers are worthy enough to go in that anthology. But I have now got to page 111 of Written on the Body by Jeanette Winterson, and I am still thoroughly enjoying the way that she's written this one. One aspect I don't like is that we are hearing this tale of an affair, and it feels like everything I'm reading at the moment is all to do with affairs. However, it is just simply sublime writing. I don't know how to explain it, but the prose has a life to it and an effervescent quality to it that I particularly enjoy reading, and it appeals to me. I suppose at times it could come across as a bit pretentious and a bit lofty, but then the way that Winterson has written the narrator, that also makes sense for the book that she's writing. It feels somewhat stylistic of the 1990s in terms of fiction. I can't explain it in a different fashion. I am just enjoying reading this, and it's come everywhere with me since Wednesday, so for a day and today, so nearly 2 days it's come everywhere with me. I've also brought my notebook with me to work in the hopes that I might get a chance to do some more writing today. However, due to traffic, it's a lot later than usual that I'd be getting in work, 10 minutes, and I know that my manager's got a meeting, so she's going to be in early today. Either way, that is me for today. I don't know that I'll get much reading done this evening because we're taking my mother out for another birthday thing with my sister and her boyfriend. It's also lambing, so things are a bit fraught at home, but I'm just glad that my younger brother came back from Scotland and he gets to deal with my father, because that man does not sleep when lambing is happening. And so my near 66-year-old father has been living off steam for about a fortnight and going and lambing these sheep, and he's just a very grouchy person to live with at the moment, but I think that anybody would be on 2 weeks without sleep. Either way, I'll see thee tomorrow to round this off. It's Saturday, and therefore we're going to do what we do every week and just draw a line underneath proceedings today. I did not finish reading Written on the Body last night. I think I told you yesterday that we were going out for my mum's birthday, which was last Saturday, but we went out last night with my sister and her boyfriend, and it was a very nice night indeed. The food wasn't much to talk about, but the conversation was grand indeed. So then I went home, had a brew, read the next section of this book, and in reading this section I found myself reminded of Maps of Our Spectacular Bodies that was up for the Booker a few years ago, I believe. Now, it's not in that it's giving cancer a voice, but it's the way that it examines the body after cancer is mentioned. Having read Mother Thing recently, I'm beginning to recognise this thing of possession and how love and possession are almost synonymous with each other in fiction, and these two books feed into that. And in terms of the cancer storyline in Written on the Body and the way that it reminds me of Maps of Our Spectacular Bodies is the way that it becomes this invasion and this possession and becomes almost like this fourth person in an affair. And I like the way that Winterson wrote about this. There is something extremely poetic about the prose in this novel, and I can't explain it. The more I read, the more I look forward to going back to this novel, and then part of me thinks that I only really started this book because I was wanting to get it off my shelves, and I was thinking about donating it to the shop, and how much of a mistake that would have been due to how much I've actually ended up enjoying this one. I have 50 pages left, and my hope is to finish it tonight, but if I don't, then my intention is to finish it tomorrow. But I'm astounded by this one, not least because, as I say, I didn't expect to end up enjoying it as much as I am enjoying it. Is enjoyment the wrong word in this situation? I don't think it is. I think that it is entirely possible to enjoy a novel in which terrible things are happening if it's been written well, and as a writer just sit in awe of prose that is featured within a text. So yeah, very much enjoyed my time spent with Written on the Body, and I would recommend it for people who like poetic prose, who like a bit of a messy love story, who like language, and don't mind an occasional dip into pretension. I recommend this to fans of Rachel Cusk? I'm not sure whether I would, but there's part of me that thinks that somebody who reads Cusk might like this book. There's part of me that thinks that if you have been a fan of those books that I've talked about recently that seem to have overtaken BookTube with The Depressed Woman Moving, then it might be interesting to go back and look at this book. If you want a book in which a person is making an entire mess of their lives, then this might be a book for you. I don't know, it's just great. But otherwise, that's me. That has been my week. If you've read any of the books that I've talked about and would like to discuss them, then please feel free to do so in the comments. Similarly, let's just chat about anything you want to chat about, really. Well, as long as it's pertaining to this video, I think. Otherwise, I hope that you have enjoyed this video, because until next time, that is all.